Hi, I'm Chris Hill, and today's video is going to be how to set up and align an Olympic recurve sight. When you get the Olympic recurve sight, it's going to have several parts. The first is there's going to be a mounting block which mounts to the riser with usually 2 screws. There's an extension bar which could be 6-inch, 9-inch, or 12-inch in length. These can be aluminum or carbon. There's a sight bar, an aperture mount, and the aperture itself, and these are all separate pieces. So the first thing you want to do is mount the mounting block onto the riser, and you want it flat. These are all made and milled so that they will sit flush on the riser and be in the correct alignment for the sight. I don't recommend really putting anything in between these or wedging them, because you can set the sight block off on an axis and then you're going to have a hard time getting the sight to align. I have in the past put a little tiny thin piece of rubber to help with the vibrations being transmitted into the sight, but for the most part I don't. I just mount it metal to metal and as hard as I can. Now once the mounting block is on, sometimes the sight bar may not be attached to the extension. It may come attached already. You're going to want to slightly loosen these 2 screws, and you're going to put the sight onto the bow backwards. So I'm going to show you that with this one here. So I've mounted the bow backwards. Now you're going to make sure that your string is lined up to the bow so that it's as fairly as straight as possible. And then what you want to do is you want to have at the bottom of the sight the aperture line up with the string, and you can move it so that it helps with your sighting. And then it should line up as you move the sight all the way down to the bottom. And you want these to be even. If it's not, then you're going to loosen the screws, mounting blocks, and you're going to move the sight side to side until you can get where the sight aperture is centered on the string at the bottom all the way to the top. This will ensure that as you shoot further distances, that the sight isn't making you aim and shoot more left or more right. So I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's the way this one is set up. Now, once that's done, then we'll take the sight out and we'll flip it around the other way. And I recommend at first putting it all the way out just for the alignment parts. And then what I want to do is I want to take an arrow, and I'm going to line the aperture up so that it's over the arrow. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that this little block in the middle is centered, so I have the most left and right windage, and then I will loosen this and move the aperture in or out so that it's pretty much centered over my arrow, and then I'll lock it down, and then I'm centered. Once you're shooting and you're tuning, you may find that you have to move your aperture slightly inside the arrow, slightly outside the arrow, and then once I do that, again, I will center the mounting block and I will move my aperture so that it's where it should be, so I have the most range of motion. This is a Shibuya Ultima. When it's centered, there's 70 clicks to the left for windage and 70 clicks to the right, so I have it set up there. Now, once that's done, you'll shoot. You may find that the extension bar has to come in or out, and I'll explain how this works as well. Let me get the smaller one. The further out the extension bar is, the more the micro adjustment can be for one click. And the way I explain it is, when I shoot at 70 meters, if my arrow is to the left, one click moves it about 4 inches. If I'm a little bit low in the 10 ring, one click will move me up 4 inches or move me down 4 inches. As I start bringing the sight bar in, that one click is going to move my arrow greater distances, 6 inches or 8 inches or 10 inches. And it may be that once you get your sight bar in, the movements are too big for you to actually aim in the middle and hit the middle. If your one click equals 9 inches and you're low yellow, you're going to do the one click and now you're going to be high yellow. You're not going to be in the center. So you always want the extension the furthest out it can be to actually for you to hit your distance. Now a lot of the youth archers, low poundage archers, junior archers have to bring their sight in some. Even me, I usually shoot in the number 2 range, which is 3 in, but that's for a different type, for the eye optic that I'll get to shortly. If your archer has trouble making the distance, you can bring the sight bar in. It brings the sight in closer and it makes the arrow land higher. And by going from all the way out to all the way in, you might be able to raise the arrow 3 feet, 6 feet, or 7 feet to get there. But you always want it out as far as you can. So start out at first and then bring in as you need to. Now for the sight itself, you can go all the way to the bottom, and I've had some kids shoot all the way to the bottom, but I find typically that, myself included, if I have 3/4 of an inch to an inch gap between the sight and my arrow, I have better groups. When the sight starts coming really close to the arrow, my kids always have this anxiety that the arrow is going to hit the sight aperture. And so their shots aren't as relaxed and they don't group as well. So I generally try to stop about 3/4 of an inch from where the arrow is for the sight aperture. And then I have the archers bring the bar in or out instead of going all the way down to the bottom. So I don't like them to max this out because the arrow, when they're looking at the aperture and they can see the arrow too, it's distracting and it gets in the way. Lastly, you will find that from your eye to the aperture to the target, that your brain likes it at a certain distance. And for me, if it all the way out, my groups open up a little bit. And I don't know whether that's just because me seeing the aperture differently because I have to wear glasses to see it. I'm farsighted. I don't know whether my brain likes it a little closer and feels more confident in the shot, or whether I'm able to hold the aperture really super still at that distance and pushing it out further that the aperture moves a little bit. And so that would open up my groups as well. But for me, being in just a little bit, my brain to eye to aperture to target really likes that. So once you get this locked down, you're good to go. My last bit of advice is with recurve equipment, there's a few things that you want to buy once and be done, and it'll last you your lifetime. One is the riser. You want to get a good quality riser from the start. It can be used, can be secondhand, but a good quality riser will last you your lifetime. Good plunger, biter plunger, buy it once and be done with it. Sight, buy a quality sight. I can't tell you how many kids in our program bought a $45 sight, and within 6 months to 8 months it had fallen apart, broken, bent, was completely useless, and they had to spend another 60 or 75 to get the next level up. To finally they would buy a good sight, whether it was used for $175, $200, or whether it was brand new for $325. With a sight, buy a quality one, buy one, and it'll last you forever. I've shot Sherlocks in the past. I had 3. I used them for 8 years. I finally sold them, and when I switched to the Shibuyas, I like the Shibuyas a little bit better because being the carbon that's lighter, and the Sherlocks are all aluminum and they're rock solid, but they tend to be a little bit heavier. And 2 years ago, I switched my bow to try to be a little bit lighter in stabilizers and weights, and so I made a lighter switch to a lighter sight as well. But any of the quality sights, there's XL, Shibuya, Sherlock, all of them are going to make a high-end sight that's going to last, whether you pick it up secondhand or not. So that would be my advice for you. Apertures, the companies sell different ones. They all make them pretty much for the same threaded, so you can swap and interchange. There's a lot of really good ones on the market. I tend to use the Shibuya sight aperture. I like it a lot. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching.